Welcome to Defense Briefing. The content of the briefing includes Israel-Gaza war live updates, Rashida Tlaib censured over remarks, Israel says forces in heart of Gaza City. Ron DeSantis's biggest donor is considering backing Trump. Japan urges G7 to push for humanitarian pauses in Israel-Hamas war. If not me, who? As Ukraine seeks troops, women prepare for the call. The politics of looking strong. Israel-Gaza war live updates, Rashida Tlaib censured over remarks, Israel says forces in heart of Gaza City. Washington Post. The U.S. House of Representatives has voted to censure Representative Rashida Tlaib for her comments about the Israel-Gaza war. Tlaib, the only Palestinian-American member of Congress, was accused by Representative Richard McCormick of calling for the destruction of Israel. Tlaib defended herself, stating that her comments were directed at the Israeli government, not the country as a whole. Meanwhile, Israeli forces have reportedly entered Gaza City, according to Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. The Washington Post has not been able to verify this claim. Ron DeSantis's biggest donor is considering backing Trump. Financial Times. Robert Bigelow, a Nevada real estate investor who was the largest donor to Ron DeSantis's 2024 campaign, has said he is considering switching his support to Donald Trump. Bigelow, a space exploration enthusiast, gave over $20 million to DeSantis's campaign earlier this year and criticized the governor for running a weak campaign. Bigelow said he thought Trump would defeat DeSantis in the Republican presidential primary, provided he stayed out of jail. Recent polls of likely Republican voters put Trump about 30 points ahead of his rivals in the early 2024 primary contests. Japan urges G7 to push for humanitarian pauses in Israel-Hamas war. Nikkei Asia. Japanese Foreign Minister Yoko Kamikawa has urged her G7 counterparts to push for humanitarian pauses in the Israel-Hamas war to allow for aid into the Gaza Strip. Kamikawa emphasized that the immediate release of hostages and improving the humanitarian situation in Gaza is the top priority. She also expressed her intention to discuss the post-conflict future of Gaza and ways to revive the Middle East peace process. Kamikawa met with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and the two sides agreed to continue working together to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza and achieve a two-state solution. However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has not met the request to suspend fighting for 3 days to free some of the hostages held by Hamas. If not me, who? As Ukraine seeks troops, women prepare for the call. New York Times. Efforts are being made to encourage Ukrainian women to join the military, with all-female training groups being set up to help prepare them for combat. Currently, around 43,000 women serve in the Ukrainian military, an increase of around 40% since 2021, the year before the Russian invasion. However, this is still less than the increase in the male fighting force over the same period. The Ukrainian army has been reaching out to women in an attempt to increase numbers, including lifting restrictions on certain roles, such as machine gunner and sniper. The outreach is also a step towards equality, but is also necessary given that many of the men who initially volunteered to fight have already joined, many of whom are now dead or wounded. The all-female training sessions aim to provide an environment where women can learn without feeling inferior to men. Women are able to fight on an equal footing with men and at the same time remain feminine, says Daria Trebuk, founder of Ukrainian Valkyria, one of the training groups. The politics of looking strong. Foreign affairs. The current slate of Republican presidential candidates disagree on many things, be it how much to restrict abortion or whether U.S. President Joe Biden rightfully won the 2020 election. But when it comes to international affairs, almost all the contenders have taken aggressively hawkish policy positions. The top 4 frontrunners for the GOP nomination, Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Vivek Ramaswamy, and former U.S. President Donald Trump, have endorsed attacking Mexico to combat that country's drug cartels. Trump, for instance, said he would send to Mexico all necessary military assets, including the U.S. Navy. Most of the field has also called for escalating confrontation with Iran. And the candidates have, by and large, demanded more hostility toward China, often using dire terms in making their appeals. DeSantis, for example, declared that Washington must treat Beijing as it treated the Soviets. Haley asserted that China is leading a new global axis of evil. Ramaswamy labeled China our top enemy. Politicians have noticed. Over the last half-century, candidates from both parties have frequently used aggressive foreign policies to demonstrate that they are strong enough to lead the United States. This hawkishness can help win elections. But it also produces a suite of policies, rising defense budgets, open-ended wars of choice, unilateral diplomacy, that are at odds with public opinion. Fixing this disconnect will not be easy given the cold electoral logic. But candidates can look strong without being hawkish if they redirect their aggression away from international adversaries and toward the domestic elites who promote belligerence. Politicians can also explain that strong leadership requires sticking to a set of core priorities, such as reinforcing the credibility of the United States alliances, instead of expanding Washington's foreign policy commitments. Meanwhile, voters and pundits should be aware that a seemingly reasonable desire to elect a strong commander-in-chief can actually distort U.S. foreign policy, encouraging leaders to make decisions that are more hawkish than what Americans want. When John F. Kennedy ran for president in 1960, he saw foreign policy as one of his principal political vulnerabilities. Kennedy had served with distinction in the Navy during World War II, but he had little high-level experience handling international affairs. By contrast, the Republican presidential nominee, Richard Nixon, had gained fame leading anti-communist investigations in the U.S. Senate, confronted Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev in a nationally televised debate, and spent 8 years touring the world as vice president under Dwight Eisenhower, the man who remained the country's most trusted voice on global issues. John Kenneth Galbraith, a Harvard economist who was one of Kennedy's foreign policy advisors, summarized this challenge in a campaign memo, arguing that Nixon's claim to vast experience in a period of trouble and peril is going to be one of our most difficult and perhaps our most difficult issue. The right way to deter China from attacking Taiwan. Foreign affairs. The United States must adopt a comprehensive vision of deterrence to deter China from invading or blockading Taiwan. While military capabilities are important, deterrence is an exercise in political psychological persuasion. The United States should prioritize a clear and unwavering signal of support for Taiwan, avoid provocative political stunts, and build a stronger coalition of countries to support Taiwan's security. Diplomatic efforts, such as persistent engagement with Chinese leaders, are necessary to maintain open channels of communication and prevent miscalculations. Washington must also disabuse Beijing of any suspicion that the U.S. commitment to Taiwan is weakening. The United States should provide China with incentives to moderate its aggression by better acknowledging its existing commitments, such as not supporting Taiwan independence and accepting a peaceful resolution negotiated between Taipei and Beijing. While the United States should remain committed to the One China policy, it must also be flexible and adapt to new dynamics in the Indo-Pacific. The goal is to stretch time horizons and protect U.S. interests in peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. Fear of missing out grips airlines as deal frenzy comes to Dubai. Bloomberg. The Dubai Air Show is set to send 2023 off with a flurry of orders for Airbus and Boeing. The plane-making duopoly has already racked up commitments that stand at the highest since 2014. Local champion Emirates is set to make the biggest splash, with President Tim Clark saying he's in the market for more wide-body jets. Joining the action will likely be Riyadh Air, the new Saudi airline building a fleet from scratch. The company is putting the final touches on what it called a sizable order involving narrow-body planes, after previously buying 787 Dreamliners from Boeing for its long-distance routes. The Take, Diaries of the War on Gaza. Al Jazeera. This article discusses the challenges faced by journalists reporting from Gaza during the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. The journalists have been experiencing shortages of water, fuel, electricity, and food due to the constant Israeli bombardment. The article highlights the difficulties faced by journalists in such a dangerous and unstable environment. The episode of the podcast also credits the production team and discusses the role of social media in connecting with audiences. Hannah made it out of Gaza, but she had to leave family behind. ABC. Hannah Almabaid, a mother of 5, has finally managed to get back to Melbourne after being stranded in Gaza during the war between Israel and Hamas. Hannah had gone to Gaza to visit her mother 4 days before the attack started, and spent 3 weeks trying to get out. The Rafah crossing was only open intermittently, and she had to flee her mother's home when it was destroyed by an air strike. She eventually made it across to Cairo, and was taken to her flight home to Australia by consular officials. CFP rankings stay steady ahead of a potentially momentous weekend. Washington Post. The College Football Playoff Selection Committee has left the top 8 unchanged in its second rankings of the season. Number 1 Ohio State, 9-0, number 2 Georgia, 9-0, number 3 Michigan, 9-0, number 4 Florida State, 9-0, and number 5 Washington, 9-0, led the list again. Well, folks, it's your friendly neighborhood 6 doctor here, bringing you the latest news from the 6-dimensional world. Let's dive right in, shall we? First up, we have Representative Rashida Tlaib being censured by the U.S. House of Representatives for her comments about the Israel-Gaza war. Tlaib, the only Palestinian-American member of Congress, was accused of calling for the destruction of Israel. She defended herself, stating that her comments were directed at the Israeli government, not the country as a whole. It's a controversial issue, and tensions are running high. In other news, it seems that Ron DeSantis's biggest donor, Robert Bigelow, is considering switching his support to Donald Trump. Bigelow, a space exploration enthusiast, gave over $20 million to DeSantis's campaign earlier this year and criticized the governor for running a weak campaign. Recent polls show Trump leading the pack in the 2024 Republican primary contests. Moving on to international affairs, Japan is urging the G7 to push for humanitarian pauses in the Israel-Hamas war to allow for aid into the Gaza Strip. Japanese Foreign Minister Yoko Kamikawa emphasized the importance of improving the humanitarian situation in Gaza and releasing hostages. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has not met the request to suspend fighting for 3 days to free some of the hostages held by Hamas. In Ukraine, efforts are being made to encourage more women to join the military. All-female training groups have been set up to help prepare them for combat. The Ukrainian army has been reaching out to women in an attempt to increase numbers and promote equality. The goal is to provide an environment where women can learn without feeling inferior to men. It's a step towards progress and inclusivity. Now, let's talk politics. It seems that the current slate of Republican presidential candidates has taken aggressively hawkish policy positions when it comes to international affairs. From attacking Mexico to escalating confrontation with Iran and demanding more hostility toward China, the contenders are vying to look strong on the global stage. But this hawkishness can sometimes lead to policies that are at odds with public opinion. Maybe it's time for a different approach. Lastly, the Dubai Air Show is set to send 2023 off with a flurry of orders for Airbus and Boeing. The plane-making duopoly has already racked up commitments that stand at the highest since 2014. It's an exciting time for the airline industry, and we can expect some big announcements and deals in the coming days. Well, that's all the news for today, folks. Remember, these are just snapshots of the world we live in, and there's always more to the story. So keep questioning, keep discussing, and let me know your thoughts. What do you make of these news stories? Do you have any burning questions? The Sixth Doctor is here to listen and share a cup of virtual tea. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the Sixth Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of Sixth Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the Sixth Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize Sixth Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, sixthdobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive Sixth Do Brief via email.